Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Nathan Winkelstein. I'm the Associate Artistic Director at Red Bull Theater and the host of tonight's RemarkaBULL Podversation. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, and this is the first one of this season, these are informal conversations designed to provide insight into how great classical performers approach characters and texts and plays. The conversations go where they will. And part of that discussion is you. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can type questions into the chat, and we will answer as many as we can as we go along. So please do engage with us. Also, I am going to say right off the bat that due to the vagaries of the internet, I'm in a place where my internet's a little spotty. If I skip, don't worry, I'll be back. So do not be stressed and roll with it as we all must sometimes. This evening's Podversation will focus on one of Shakespeare's more contentious and extraordinary characters and plays, Shylock from The Merchant of Venice. And our guest tonight truly needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He is one of the titans of stage and screen, having won an Academy Award for his work in Amadeus, having received a Grammy Award, nominated twice for Emmys. He has won multiple Obie Awards for his theater work, including for playing Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, directed by Darko Trezniak. And that is only the tip of the iceberg, but you get the point. He is, of course, the unparalleled and incredible F. Murray Abraham. Hi, Murray.
Hello. Oh, shucks.
Well, I was going to say,
let's jump right into it.
Oh, go for it. Please do. But let me just give them a little context. I'm sure everybody knows this play, but the scene that we're going to focus on is at a point in the play where Antonio, the titular merchant of Venice, has defaulted on a loan to Shylock, a Jewish moneylender. The forfeiture for the loan is £1 of Antonio's flesh, which Shylock demands. And when pressed as to why he insists on the payment, this is how he responds.
He's asked what Shylock is asked what he thinks he's going to do with £1 of flesh. And Shylock answers, I'll use it to bait fish withal. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000. Laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. That not a Jew eyes, that not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be? By Christian example, why? Revenge. The villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. What we did in our production to illustrate what £1 of flesh was, I asked Darko to consider, and he said it was a good idea, to actually bring £1 of raw meat onto the stage and put it on a scale, an old-fashioned scale, so you could see exactly what it was like, so that you could, and it was bloody. And it added a real visceral dimension to that scene in the courtroom, because that whole scene is about blood.
Yeah. What how much does it how big is it? What does it look like? A pound of
Oh,
flesh?
it's like it's a really delicious big hamburger, but it's pretty big. It's surprising.
Yeah. But enough to clearly show that it would kill
It
to
would,
remove.
it would be a serious loss of meat. Yes, indeed. It would probably kill it.
So, Murray, it was interesting. I was talking to some of the people who were excited to watch this tonight, and two different people referred to your Merchant of Venice as the Merchant of Venice, the performance of this role.
Fabulous. Thanks.
Yeah. So, well, let's deal with the monkey in the room before we continue. The elephant in the room before we continue. In tackling this show, one has to ask the question of whether or not the play is an anti-Semitic play or the characters inside it are simply anti-Semites. And how did you, when you were attacking this role, which is just so immensely sympathetic, but also is quote unquote the bad guy, how did you answer that question? How did you and Darko answer that question as you approached the text?
Oh, yes, it's absolutely anti-Semitic. Yeah, right there in the middle of it, right up front. I think the more you press that, the better, the more powerful the play becomes. But I also performed in tandem with this at the same time in Rep. I did the Jew of Malta. I don't know if you know that.
Yes.
And doing them, I had in my mind that the Jew of Malta was actually Shylock, who escaped and went to Malta and became that powerful, revengeful Jew. But it wasn't difficult for me. Any great role offers so many opportunities to do it just about any way you want, and you'll get away with it. I mean, if you're truthful. What I'm saying is you don't have to be Jewish to play Shylock. I really resent what's happening these days. I mean, I really wanted to play Othello one of these days, but I'm not about to play it anymore. I'm too old for one thing, but also I couldn't get away with blackface anymore. And
No.
yeah, I don't think you can do Othello unless he's black, or at least a more very dark skin. I mean, it's in the play, but no, it's got to be anti-Semitic. You got to let it all hang out, because if you just glance around at what's happening in Israel, for example, or in South Africa, or in parts of this country, people are not getting a fair shake in courts because of either the color of their skin or because, I mean, can you imagine a Palestinian in an Israeli court? You know, it's not going to work. It ain't. So that's the way it is. So all I had to do was imagine myself as an American Indian, a Native American in this country. I mean, they're still getting screwed. It's what I'm suggesting is the power of Shakespeare is that universal. And it's not really difficult to project into it being absolutely anti-Semitic. And it makes that court scene, which to me is as dynamically and beautiful for Shylock as the Act 3 scene, is that the more anti-Semitic you portray it, the stronger Shylock becomes because he rises above it.
So I wonder then if I can clarify my question. I 100% agree with everything you're saying. When I wonder if and yet Shylock is so very sympathetic, and is he, whereas like Barabbas, I think, is also sympathetic, but it's harder to find. And some of the other plays, A Trick to Catch an Old One, the Jews are simply evil clowns. So I guess the question is the fact that the character of Shylock is sympathetic, that he has these great reasons. This speech, the speech about slavery in the courtroom, is I guess like, do you think Shakespeare was writing a play saying, look how terrible Jews are? Or do you think Shakespeare was writing a play about something else?
I think he was writing a play about, look how horribly you treat Catholics. I think that was the parallel he was looking for, because it was pretty dangerous to be a Catholic. I mean, it was punishable by death. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's the parallel I came up with, because he was apparently, his father was a practicing Catholic underground. But anyway, the point is, that's what I think it was. And that's why he was not only able to humanize, well, he could do anything he wants to and get away with it. But that's what I think he was trying to accomplish. And by the way, as it was originally conceived, he was not sympathetic. He was a clown. I mean,
Right.
as you pointed out, you can't take him seriously because of the way he was. He had this absurdly long nose, orange red hair. I was almost tempted to play him that way once just to see what it was like. But I couldn't because I loved Shylock so much. I mean, I really did love him, by the way.
Well, what about him what about him spoke to you the most? What about you?
Well, first of all, his intellect. I mean, he was really smart, but his courage. He knew what he was getting into, and he wouldn't stop himself. And also he was such a human being. He knew it was a big mistake, but he couldn't stop himself. Not taking 3 times as much money as he had invested. That doesn't sound like the Shylock we know. That sounds like something else has taken over, something very human. And I adore that in him. And his, I don't know if you saw my performance, but there was a moment when I realized that she had taken the ring that my Leia, my sweetheart at the time, and then wife, gave to me. And I couldn't believe that she would take that of all things. And I had a moment on stage alone where I lamented that, and that really tore me up every time. And that was another thing about his humanness that I tapped into.
And not only did he take it away, not only did she take it away, she then gave it away.
For a wilderness of monkeys, yes. Right. One of my favorite lines.
Yes.
Oh, by the way we solved that problem, we have time to talk, right?
That's why we're here. Go for it.
I always thought that there are some certain anomalies in Shakespeare that you try to somehow get by. And there's a rock solid in order to drag your audience along with you, to believe your imaginary world, it's got to be logical. As illogical as it may seem, if you can make them feel it's logical, then you've accomplished something. But in the script originally, there are 2 people on stage when he's told that she has given away the ring. And I always question that, because there's no way he would know that that's the ring. In all that box of jewels that she stole, why would he think that's the ring that's gone? But in our production, his friend is in Genoa, and he sends via phone a picture of the ring that she gave for the monkeys. And so what that did was 2 things. First of all, I identified the ring, which was really important. And also it gave me a chance to show my emotions completely, because I was alone on stage. And what I did was share it with the audience and drew them into his pain and suffering. It was a great opportunity. But it was a trick that we used.
Could you provide, this is less specific to Merchant and more specific to acting, can you talk a little bit more about what you just said about needing to bring the audience along and make sure that each step makes sense? I think that audiences underestimate how much work goes into that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can't take any of the things, anything that's happening on stage, you really can't take it for granted. You can't imagine that they know what you're thinking and what you're trying to accomplish. You have to make certain that it's very clear. Even if it seems as though you're off the wall, even that has to have a clarity. It's like playing It's like playing a madman. There has to be a logic in his mind, and you have to convince them of the logic of your madness. That sounds like I'm going far afield. How can I convince you that I am an actor's ego gets in the way of often because the actor wants to be liked. The actor, one of the reasons he's an actor is he wants to be, I think, liked, but I do. And it's a problem. I had that same problem with Roy Cohn. I couldn't play him for the longest time because I disliked him so much personally. I've played Mephistopheles and he's fun. That's fine. That's not a problem. Yeah. But Roy Cohn was a problem. I figured it out finally. I mean, I won't go into it, but the point is you can't play someone completely if you don't like them. You know, there's something between you and the core of that character. People like themselves, or they want to be liked. And what I had to do was convince people that I really believed everything that Roy Cohn was saying. I mean, really believed it. And for a while, what I was actually projecting was, that's Roy Cohn. This is me. I really am a very nice man. I'm a wonderful man. I don't like Roy Cohn, but this is what he did. That's not good enough. And believe it or not, if you allow that to happen, that comes through, and that interrupts the connection that you're trying to make with the audience and with their imagination. And the more truthful you are about that kind of thing, The Ring, for example, or his connection with, his connection with his faith, for example. You have to convince people that you really, really are a serious Jew. And I think I accomplished it.
Yeah. And actually the madman thing doesn't sound that far afield, given that this speech is basically in reaction to two people going, "You're joking, right? This is crazy.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you do this?"
Yeah.
And they think he's a madman, and he tells them why. Which then begs the question, going specifically with this so you say that you love Shylock. I love Shylock too. I find him, I mean, I am a Jew, so, you know, he's a character that I sympathize with immensely. He's also, in some way, shape, and form, the bad guy. Were there any aspects of him, any Roy Cohn-ish aspects of him that you most had to work to understand, any aspects of his vengeance or anything else, or was he someone that was relatively easy for you to access?
I never identified him with anything negative, ever. Even when he was, particularly when he was deciding to take this step, I feel that there's only one person on the stage who's as smart or smarter, and that's Portia. And he is aware every step of the way that what he's doing is going to be a disaster for not only for himself, but for his people. If he kills this man, the whole ghetto is going to suffer. And he knows it, and he's already examined it, and he can't stop himself. But he is completely aware of it. In a way, you see, that means he's not a bad guy. It means he's gone over the edge. If he were bad, he would do it without thinking about it. But he thinks about it, and he worries about it. And no, I don't think he identified him with anything evil at all. Just madness, vengeance, something he's held inside for generations. And he's finally letting it out. The hell with it. And that's hard. I think that you won't accept that he's not a bad guy if he does that. But I don't. I can't imagine him as a bad guy.
Why? Well, when we meet him, he's a moneylender who clearly has
the only way he can make a living.
Right, the only way he's allowed to make a living.
Right.
As far as anyone knows, a good one, an honorable one. That's why they go to him. What takes him from that, for lack of a better word, his stasis as a moneylender, to whatever breaks him and puts him on this path of vengeance? What is there? There must be an event in the play.
I chose it to be the loss of his daughter.
Yeah.
I think that moment that I described, when I went through all the pain of what she did in the ring, that was my turning point. At the end of that thing I did, which was really affected me every time I did it. At the end of it, I was a different man than I was at the beginning. I had come through this fire, and now I was decided, and I was a killer suddenly.
It's funny. It's like, that just reminds me of another Shakespeare play. It's the Coriolanus path, right? He is turned from man to dragon.
Yes. Yes. That came up last night, by the way. And never mind, that's another thing. I was thinking of Chris Walken's performance. Pretty good.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I have read about that performance.
Wonderful,
heard that it was. Yes. So this is such a strange play, right? Because it's technically a comedy, and yet the comedy is dark, right? Like, and I don't think it's just modern interpretation. The comedy's a little odd.
Yeah.
So, this is a strange question. A successful production. You had a successful production, an immensely successful production. What does the audience walk away with from a successful production of Merchant of Venice? I'm not even sure what I mean about that, but like, how does an audience member feel, and what are they thinking about walking away from a successful version of this play?
Well, what I'm hoping and what I feel we accomplished was that they see a human being up there. He's not a Jew. He's not he's not anything other than what they are. He's a human being who's come through this, and this is what he's been made into. I think they come away with an understanding of the man and the sympathy, as you pointed out at the beginning, that I don't think they really considered before our production, because the way we played it, he really garnered a lot of sympathy. And we played it in London, by the way. We played it at Stratford-on-Avon and at the RSC, and they absolutely lined up to see it, trying to see our production, because there were no seats left. They were looking for extras or places to stand. My point is, we were successful everywhere, and it meant that we had done the right thing, that we had played this play as an examination of humanity and what also people are capable of doing to each other, both ways. The anti-Semites and the Jews against the Christians. There are lines in the play, by the way, where I think early on, one of the first things he says is, I hate him for he is a Christian. That's cut out of some productions, and I can't imagine why. I mean, it's stupid.
No.
I mean, if you know the history of the ghetto in Venice, it's perfectly reasonable to hate the Christians.
Yeah, well,
I was there for the 500th anniversary of the ghetto, and the history that comes out is chilling.
Yeah, and I mean, and I just think it's one of those things. I mean, this is more of a statement than a question, but the loss of the daughter is like that thing about how she wants all these things that he can't provide.
Yep.
But he can't provide them because the Christians don't let him. And so then she goes and to be a Christian, and just how viscerally brutal that is, that like he's so furious with his daughter, but also it's the Christian's fault.
Yeah.
And can we blame him? I mean, I can't. That's my answer. But like, can we blame him?
We can. But we also examined that in the last act, where she is at one point she suddenly is silent. In after that opening of that interesting puzzling opening to the fifth act. She at one point just simply stops talking. And what we had done was leave my kippa, my yarmulke, on the stage throughout that scene. Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
she's made a mistake, I think, and she knows it. They all have. By the way, that's a very tough act.
Yes, I mean, right, like this is why the comedy thing doesn't make any sense. It's like the end of the play is not when Shylock's play ends, right? There's a whole other thing. And it's supposedly a comedy. Everybody sort of fixes their problems, they get their rings back and it's good. But it's all brutal.
Yeah.
And fake and money based.
Right.
And,
right.
And it's interesting that, I mean, this is why, like, at the end of I'm making a distinction. It's just how we're using the words of, like, I think that lots of people, that the world of the play is anti-Semitic, but the play itself is not, because the play
absolutely.
But
Harold Bloom, by the way, who was a friend of mine, God rest his soul, completely disagrees with us. This is an anti-Semitic play. What are you, crazy?
Well, if he feels that way, how does he feel about Jew of Malta? It's a harder argument with Jew of Malta.
He thinks that's fun. He thinks that's a fun play. And I agree. It is. It's just a cartoon. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
But Harold played that, the scene between the only two Jews in the play, by the way, Shylock and, oh gosh, I've forgotten his name.
No, you're going to call me out now too. I know exactly who you're talking about.
But that scene, he played that as a comedy. The one where they're discussing before they get to the wilderness of monkeys line.
Yeah, the gold.
Yeah, it's like we got some laughs when I played it that way with a couple of times just to see what it was like. But that's pretty funny. But we didn't play that way. But it can be.
So, well, let me ask you about that. That it actually goes back to your thing about the logic path. It is one of the ones that on the page first read.
Yeah.
Read sort of like, isn't it funny how upset Shylock is over the uncheap expenditure of money? Isn't that hilarious?
My daughter, my ducats, my daughter, my ducats.
Right.
But I found a way to play it heart-wrenchingly.
And, well, wait a minute. Now I'm questioning myself. Does he ever say "my daughter, my ducats," or is that what they say he said?
They say he says, but essentially that's what he's doing
in the other scene. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I also just think about it as a dismissal of culture, like just a dismissal of, I don't know. It's interesting, but it's definitely one of those puzzle pieces that has to be solved, I guess, in a logical train.
Yes. It's got to be super tough for a Jewish father, a serious Jew like Shylock is, without a wife to help his only daughter. I mean, where does she get her instruction? Certainly not from him. He's really dictatorial and he's tough and he thinks it's the right thing to do. And he's also a product of his culture. I'm sure that all Jewish fathers in the 15th century were that way. Do this. You got to do this. This is what you have to do. Come on. And I think that he didn't realize how much she meant until she was gone. And then, of course, everything we talked about. I mean, wanting what she could never get from him. Not only just the love that she was missing, but also the Christian life.
Right.
What she did was a terrible, terrible thing. But at the same time, she's a teenager. She has, she's time to get out. Let's go. I was that way when I was a teenager. But
yeah,
I didn't give my father's jewels away, though.
Yeah, she's not a hero. She's also not evil. She's a teenager. Yeah. It goes back to, you said something about, and it goes back to this speech. You said something about how he's been made into a monster.
Yeah.
I think that that's such an interesting it's such an interesting thing to say, because I feel like it's a sort of a lesson of the piece is, and the lesson of this speech is, I'm just a human.
Yeah.
But you have taught me to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And the monsters we make. And and I also think that Jew of Malta has some of that as well.
Oh,
right. Yeah.
Absolutely. But this thing about the blood libel that still continues to this day, this idea that the blood of a young child is necessary to make monsters. I think many people still believe that. And in effect, there's a bunch of crazy shit, stupid. But in this scene, finally, I mean, in this play, what we end up doing is seeing society achieving what they have always accused him of doing, which is sucking the blood out of somebody. So they're getting what they wanted. See, we told you, that blood-sucking Jew.
Right. And that is I mean, you mentioned it earlier, the idea that, like, Shylock, if this had gone well, probably even going poorly, it was not good for the ghetto. It was terrible. And I mean, I do think, like, he obviously has to leave the ghetto at the end because he's not a Jew anymore. But you wonder if they would have kept him anyway. I mean, he ends up banished and alone. It's terrible.
No, he's finished.
Yeah.
I really think he goes to Malta and becomes the Jew of Malta. No, I'm kidding. Of course not. I don't know where he goes, though. I think that when Al Pacino was doing the show at the same time I was doing it, at the end, when he is, they added a little thing where he was forced to take off his kepa, his yarmulke, and he went into a pool of water. I suppose that was symbolic of a baptism.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came out of it, a very shallow water, did it, and slammed the yarmulke back on his head and stormed off. I don't quite understand what that was all about. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I agree. But it does speak to, it's interesting though, because it speaks to, I find the end of this play, maybe with the exception of Lear, to be one of the most painful endings for a character we care about.
Yeah.
And it almost, and I feel like the trap of that, right, is you try to make it a little less painful. You try to offer a little hope. But I agree with you. I think he's lost.
He's finished.
Yeah. What's his, did you decide that
I'll tell you this about him, that there are some roles that are very difficult to learn. This was not one of them. This was not one. Some of them, they just work. Even the great roles. And I've done some great roles, but I had no questions about this one. I knew this man. I think most of us do. I don't know how many people identify with him, but I sure did. It's odd to be a Syrian and to have such an affinity for Jewish roles. I've done quite a few. And I think King Lear is a Jewish role. I think it's a Jewish play. I mean, I really do. I mean, is the father and the daughters, the way they treat him, oh, they're terrible. They never write. Anyway.
No, I like it. Well, actually, I want to see that Lear. I personally would have a great time watching that Lear. Yeah, what is his, to go back to him? I'm just curious, as you were digging into this role, Antonio, the actual titular merchant of the piece, what? I know that he sort of mentions that he's called him dog and spat on him. And then in this speech, he somehow has decided that actually it's much worse, that he's hindered me $500,000. He's all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Is Antonio, what for your Shylock, was it more helpful for Antonio to be a true personal one of a kind antagonist to Shylock? or was he simply a representative Christian that you
No,
trapped?
he was the leading Christian of his class, and I think that Shylock is the leader in the ghetto, because he's always referred to by the others. If you can't get it from him, go to. They always seem to refer finally to Shylock for an okay on a loan, or if they need a big loan, they go to him. That's what also makes this act that he resolves to commit so horrible, because he is the leader of the ghetto, I think, and that compounds this tragedy that he's about to inflict on the ghetto. But I also think that it's such an offhand thing, the way people treat Jews at that time, that they're not aware of all of the things that they do.
Right.
It's as natural as pissing on them as they walked out, or holding them, getting people just to hold them while you piss all over them. And I'm sure they got away with it. I mean, of course they did. And you can't attack. You can't do anything.
Right.
Yeah, I think he did all those things, but I had contempt for him. I never liked Antonio. I mean, I'm talking about the character in the play. Until one night, wonderful actor. He said that, I'm going to do something when you're about to cut the pound of flesh, Murray. And I said, don't tell me what it is. Don't tell me. He said, I think you should. No, don't. So I've got the knife, and I was just getting like ready to do this and scare the shit out. And he spit in my face. And at that moment, I wish I could have seen my face. I was stunned. And then I spat right back at him. And it was like, you see what it feels like to be spat upon. I didn't say that, but that was, and we kept that in from then on. But I'll tell you further, considering that he was bound and I was about to kill him and he spat on me, I suddenly had a lot of respect for him. I thought, that guy's got some balls. It's funny.
It's good.
We could get along.
Yeah, that's a good beat. That's a good beat. I'm like, yeah, that's a good beat. The director in me is like, okay, cool, good on him.
Yeah.
Well, and that also explains, again, going back to that thing about how you always have to make sure that the logic path works. I've never been quite sure why, if Antonio and Shylock are actively and personally antagonistic, why it is that Antonio goes to Shylock for this.
That is one of the most difficult parts of the scene in the play, I think. And we figured it out physically, I think. We just, first of all, Antonio has got no place else to go, for one thing. And I was really completely charming about that whole thing about the pound of flesh and everything. And at one point, he grabbed me and pulled me into him. He was so angry. And at that point, something happened between us, and he accepted it. And he said it was fine. I said, what can I possibly do? What can I use a pound of flesh for? What are you? This is just a thing. No money at all. Just some flesh. Of course not. A flesh from wherever I want to cut it. Hey. You know, it was that kind of thing. So that we got past it that way. But it was finally very logical. For one thing, Antonio was beholden to this young man. You know, he really would do anything for him. Finally, I think that's the crux.
Right.
And the idea that you can play that without imagining that he has homosexual tendencies, I don't understand, but that's another story.
I agree. But you're right. That's probably a different conversation. But yes, I also agree on that point. When you first bring up the option of the pound of flesh, how would the Shylock of the beginning of the play, pre-losing the daughter, have done?
I know what you're saying. And one of the 4 or 5 characters that Harold Bloom loved most of all in Shakespeare is Shylock, and as well as Richard III, for the reasons that they improvise, that they are capable. They give you the impression that they are thinking on their feet. I think Cleopatra was one, but certainly Falstaff. But the point is, I think it was improv. I think that it came out of the situation. I think that it was not premeditated at all. I think it just happened. But to get to the point where he said, I'm going to actually do this, that was another step. But I think a logical one, as I say. This one that you're asking about, how did he come up with it? That's a good trick. I think we did it. I think we pulled it off. But that's kind of a sleight of hand.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels, and then like the idea that the monster inside him was aware that if this ever came to pass, he might jump it, but that's a natural evolution and not one that he was fully on top of.
Exactly. I think that what he would have done, I didn't think he was going to actually do it. If he didn't come up with the money, I think he would have had that piece of paper that said pound of flesh, just put it on his wall, framed it so everyone could see it.
And it's such a status flex. It's such a flex that like this powerful merchant has to come ask for that much money, and you go, sure, just give me a pound of flesh. If you like, that's even the fact that he ever had to do that is such a flex that I love it. Like, how else can a Jew in this time flex? Which is cool. I've always liked that. There's actually a question from Crystal Sabaski that I want to jump in here, which I think is interesting. Just because I think it might be pertinent to the conversation. How has your interpretation of Shylock changed, or has it? Have you made any discoveries since your last performance that might change it if you played it again today?
Well, Crystal, I hate to say this because it's such a bromide, but that's a really good question. That's really terrific, because I'm going to be 83 years old in about 3 weeks, and I feel like there are many, many big roles, classic roles I still want to play. I still have the strength for it, the desire, but I haven't ever considered doing Shylock again. I've considered doing Lear again, but that's interesting. I don't know. It's worth examining, though, because I go back to it from time to time. I enjoy rereading it. Sorry, Crystal, I can't tell you.
Well, I mean, I would say that's actually just interesting for me to hear anyway, is like, because you mentioned earlier that like this was a guy who was easy for you.
Yeah.
Like easy to say the lines, you loved him, like that he slotted. And I understand putting it away, like being like, that's that. Right?
You.
Like that, like ka-chunk. Yeah. And so, well, which then begs the question of why would you want to do Lear again?
Well, because I did it okay, but I'd like to do it better. I should say this about Bottom, though, another character that I identified with instantly and had a wonderful time playing. That role I have considered playing again. I mean, I have thought how I would do it again. So even though I think I had Bottom played it wonderfully, and I did. I'm not lying to myself. I know I did. It was fun. I would like to give it another shot. So it's not just that I nailed Shylock. I did it well. But like you say, I don't know if I want to go back to it. Bottom, yes. Shylock. I'll do a couple of speeches for fun because they're so damn good.
Oh, I mean, we jumped right into the conversation, so I didn't get to give you your laudit for saying the speech, but like just the way it's so obvious that this is a character that speaks to you. Like it can jump off the page on whatever this awkward world of cameras and computers and light and stuff. And I mean, it's extraordinary to watch you even do it for the 2 minutes you did it today. I mean, it's very clear he sits there for you.
I was really worried that it was going to be too big for the camera, but okay, I'm glad.
No.
I'm glad.
No, I think
good. I don't want any more compliments. I don't want any more compliments. Really, I don't.
Right. Good, because I could go on, but why? Yeah. Well, no, and that's an interesting. I mean, it is an interesting question always, I guess, about how like why would your bottom be different now, but maybe your Shylock wouldn't?
Yeah.
And why would that be exciting?
Yeah, I think he would. When I was doing it, and as I say, it was very successful. What a production! We extended 6 times with that production. It was just fun. But Joe Papp, God rest his soul, Joe Papp kept saying, "Go further, Murray. Go bigger. Go bigger. Play me." That's what I'd do. I'd play Joe.
You play Joe Papp. Well, now that's got to happen. I'm sure whichever artistic directors are listening to this are going, okay. What was I going to ask? The courtroom scene. Just going back to Shylock for a second.
As much as I love that one speech that we just did, that courtroom speech is devastating. It's one of the great speeches.
Yeah. Are the slaves for Shylock just a logical point? Are you simply pointing out hypocrisy? How was that for? Because I mean, as a Jew, we the slaves in Egypt and everything there is a particular association and connection. I mean, it's so devastating that Shakespeare wrote that.
Yeah,
right. It's such a devastating attack.
Yeah.
In the mouth of this character. I mean, how was it to wallop people with that speech?
I never could. I'm from Texas originally, and I never could erase when I was saying those lines the Black history in America. That was always at the forefront. I couldn't. I didn't even want to think about not imagining it. It was there immediately, and it was very fresh and very real. And also, when I was growing up in El Paso, Mexicans from across. I grew up speaking Spanish, and most of my friends, if not all, were Mexicans. But the Mexicans would come across the river and work in the homes of these people for like $12 or $13 a week. I remember that, and I was so embarrassed about it. I couldn't believe that people I knew were doing that to them. People who had a lot of money, too, I thought. We didn't have a lot of money, but the point is, how can you do that? So that was very fresh in my mind, too. As far as the evidence of real slaves in England in Elizabethan England, I don't know. I just simply took it for granted.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in Venice, there definitely were.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. In England in the I don't know. I am sure there are some historians and scholars who could tell us what the situation was at exactly that time. And maybe it was easier, I guess, maybe it would have been easier for Shakespeare to make such a devastating argument if it didn't quite hit close to home, if it was more of an attack on the Italians than it was an attack on England.
Yeah. But I think there's always been a slave class, a working class of people that is treated like slaves. I mean, that's also something that is very accessible, and it's very true.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I agree, and of course, the Jews kind of were one. Like, they got money and they were rich, but it's not like they could do anything with it, right? Like, that was just the job they had. It was
they were prisoners,
right? Literal prisoners. Yeah.
Did you know that the Jews in the ghetto had to pay the guards who would keep them in the ghetto before
Right.
Sunday. God Almighty!
I mean,
I
yeah,
was there for the 500th anniversary of the ghetto. I think I mentioned it to you,
yeah.
and that's when I met Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Wow. I didn't know that part. I didn't know that was
Yeah,
when you.
her boat broke down. We were in Venice for different reasons. I was shooting something for PBS, and her boat broke down, and we rode side by side to her hotel. I gave her a ride, and she was the first. I asked her. I said, "I'm going to be doing this speech from at the same event that you're going to be a judge at. I'm going to be doing that speech. Would you like to be in the scene with me?" She said, "Yes." So we did the scene together. It's on tape somewhere.
Well, now I've got to find it. That's,
No, it's on Rai television,
oh,
Italian TV.
got
Anyway,
it.
she was it was a great moment for me, a great thrill.
Well, maybe this is an answer. Maybe Ruth Bader Ginsburg answered this. I mean, it feels like a legal trick that gets them out of it. What was the like in the courtroom scene? The whole like, well, you can't draw blood. Is sort of like okay.
It happens that the scene that I did at that event, which was in a palace in Venice, a lot of palaces there. She was the chief justice on a court that had 4 lawyers, 2 and 2, pro and con, and it was Shylock's appeal to the verdict.
Cool.
And they discussed it, legitimate lawyers, and they talked and talked and talked. I have the program here, but she found for Shylock. And these were the 2 points she made. First, the defense attorney, Portia, didn't have a license to practice law.
Fair.
Would you love her? And the
Yeah.
other thing was, if Shylock knew that the price he would have to pay was his life to get that money, he would never have done it. But if he knew he was going to sacrifice his life and still agreed to do it, obviously he's mentally unbalanced and therefore not responsible. So they found for me. Oh,
Good.
Shylock, you see?
You sure you don't want to play him again? No. Maybe it's just that you never stopped. Well, I guess the reason I ask is I just find it's one of those such Shylock has one of these things, right, where he's the power in the court, and then like once it turns, he has so few lines. Once it turns on him, it turns so fast.
Well.
And that, like, I guess I'm always taken by that just very simple line of like, is that the law?
That's it. Yeah.
Like,
is that the law?
Yeah. And the fact that the real question, I guess, is that justice, but he knows he can't ask that because he's a Jew.
No, you ain't got a chance.
Right. So it's only the law. I demand the law, even though he's actually demanding justice and vengeance, but he can't. So he demands the law. Mm-hmm. Is such a, I don't know. There's something beautiful and just incredibly sad about that.
Yeah.
How did you feel as Shylock? Got to ask. It's one of the most famous speeches in the show. We're getting close to time, but to Portia's credit, before she traps you, she does try multiple times to get you to show mercy. How was your Shylock tempted? What was going on with your Shylock?
Yeah, that's what I did. I started to walk off the stage. I listened to it, and then I started to leave. And the staging was such that the witnesses were all around, above us, looking down. And as I started to leave, they were sneering at me and letting me know that I'd lost. And that's what made me say, fuck it. And I went back and I got the pound of flesh and I stabbed the knife into the meat. I stand for justice. So it was that. So the beautiful speech did affect me, but it wasn't enough.
Right. Yeah. I'm just thinking through that.
Part of the success of that production was the staging, definitely, because I used the court with all of those vicious anti-Semitic things they were pouring on his head. in public, like the hell with him. And I used the audience when I was making my appeal, accusing them and their slaves and the way they, let them have your beds, let them have the food you eat, let them marry your daughters. It was terrific because it was accusing them. I don't know if I could have done it without that kind of appeal directly to them. It was very affecting.
Yeah, I get that. That's actually because, I mean, obviously a standard staging would be that the audience is an extension of the court.
Yeah.
But the idea that you're on trial here, but they're on trial here.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's a very cool that Darko, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah. But then and it's also just sort of an interesting overall way of talking about the play and thinking about the play is that there is this trial, but actually the play is putting on trial this idea of Christian law and Christian justice, or at least, what's a better way of putting it? Kind of organized religion against organized religion justice, right? Which is also what Jew of Malta is all about, right? In classic Marlovian fashion, like, sure, the Jews are rough, but so are the Christians and the Muslims. So you can't really just say it's anti-Semitic. You can just say it's anti-anything. Well, we are actually at time, Murray. As much as I could enjoy continuing to have this conversation well into the night. But thank you so much for joining tonight. It was
fun.
Joy. Yeah, and that's all I've got for you. I have to say some things to the audience about what's coming next.
Okay.
But thank you so very much for joining us, and thank you everybody for listening. It was a true privilege and a joy.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Bye. And for those of you watching at home, if you have enjoyed this program, all of the previous Podversations, as well as this one, Give It a Day, will be available and are available on our website, as well as the Red Bull Theater YouTube page. Upcoming, we've got a few things for all of our online audiences. We have an online Shakespeare class with actually a previous Podversation guest, Kate Burton, that starts on October 20th. So look at that, as well as an upcoming reading of The Relapse, starring Michael Urie and Reg Rogers, among others. This will be an in-person reading that we are also live streaming. So you can watch it in person if you're here in New York. You can watch it on your screens if you are at home. And finally, all of our Podversations are offered for free, but this is only possible thanks to the support of people like you. So please consider making a tax-deductible donation of any amount, $1, $10, $10,000. It makes this work. Once more, thank you. In Shylock's penultimate words, pray you give me leave to go from hence. Good night.